Across the pantheon of heavy battle mechs, there are few that match as closely as the Grasshopper and Guillotine. Each of them fills a similar role as an agile frontline battle mech that has a reputation for being tough to bring down. But as with our previous entry in the Versus series, we need to figure out which has the grit and gumption to come out on top. Today we're going to pit these 70-ton monsters against each other, and when the smoke clears, one of them will take the proverbial crown. After sifting through all the feedback from the last video, I've upgraded my methods and vastly increased the number of data points to generate more substantive results. I hope you can stick around and see how it all pans out. But first, we need to get to know a little bit about today's competitors, starting with the noble Guillotine. First stepping off the assembly lines in 2499, the Guillotine was among the earliest battle mech designs in the first 50 years after the creation of the Mackie. This shouldn't imply that the 3N was primitive, as we'll see. It was treated with some of the latest and greatest technology of the age. Constructed from Crucis 1 endo steel wrapped around a Vox 280 fusion engine, the GLT-3N Guillotine could reach a top speed of 64 km per hour. The addition of Anderson 398 jump jets along with a reinforced command chair and leg construction further improved the battlemech's agility and pushed the movement profile to 464. 12 tons of Ulston Prime standard plate armor provided 192 points of protection, which placed it on the upper end of the 70-ton pantheon. For comparison, the GHR-5H Grasshopper carried 13 tons of standard plate, and the CTF-1X Cataphract carried 11 tons. With 6 tons of cockpit and gyro, along with 25 single heat sinks, that left 13.5 tons of mass for weaponry. Rather than going with a flashy weapon like a PPC or a large-bore autocannon, Newhart's engineers added a Sunglow large laser to the left arm. While the laser itself was quite reliable, the connection between the weapon and the fusion power converter at the core of the mech took a complicated path through the shoulder joint. Only after production started was it discovered that sometimes if the mech's left arm was raised above the shoulder level, the fiber optic lines to the laser could become tangled and prevented the laser from firing. Experienced pilots learned to troubleshoot that situation by briefly lowering the arm and raising it again, which usually fixed the issue. Inexperienced pilots sometimes tried to force the arm higher to unjam it, which could snap the cables entirely. The fix for it was costly, as it required running entirely new lines from the center torso to the arm. Moving on to more pleasant news, 4 ExoStar 2 medium lasers were added to the Guillotine to further bolster its brawling credentials. With 2 in the right arm and 1 in each side torso, these reliable weapons could end up being workhorses through hundreds of years of warfare. Only relatively recently in the timeline were they challenged by their extended range and pulse laser options. Finally, a Coventry SRM-6 launcher was installed into the center torso to make closing on the mech an opportunity to taste high explosive. The launcher's 1 ton of ammunition was set into the right torso and was originally protected by case, which vented any ammunition explosions out the back of the mech rather than toward the engine or squishy Mechwarrior in his or her cockpit. Overall, the GLT-3N Guillotine represented a good balance between mobility, strength, and firepower. Just keep in mind when comparing it to other heavy mechs with more firepower that opportunity cost spares no one. Of course, we can't forget one of the mech's defining features, the searchlight above the cockpit, which contributes greatly to the battle mech's unique look and added functionality in low-light environments. With the grizzled old man and the fight sorted out, we need to tackle the newbie. The GHR-5H Grasshopper was first produced in 2780 and stands as a good bookend for the fall of the Star League, which crumbled officially that same year. So between the Grasshopper, which helped us usher in the proverbial golden age for human exploration and civilization, to marking its collapse with a Grasshopper into hundreds of years of barbaric apocalypse. What a pair. Constructed around a Ming Z-33-7 chassis wrapped around a Vox 280 fusion engine, the 5H Grasshopper hit a top speed of 64 km per hour. On its own, this was not remarkable for a 70-ton battle mech, as we saw with the Guillotine. However, the inclusion of the Leviathan lifter jump jets pushed the battle mech's movement profile up to 464, which did offer the opportunity to surprise the uninitiated with what LinkedIn accounts might describe as flexible vertical and longitudinal integration strategies in a fast-paced work environment. Wrapped in sleek 13 tons of standard Duralex plate armor, the Grasshopper was fairly protected from incoming fire. This matched the protection of the Archer 2R and was 3 full tons more than the Warhammer 6R. The Guillotine 4L carried 12 tons, as we've previously mentioned, and the Noble Black Knight BL7 carried just 11. With all those in mind, I think we can definitely say that the Grasshopper was well armored. The max possible for a 70-tonner was 14 tons anyway, so how greedy can we be? As far as armament goes, several different sources describe the 5H Grasshopper as being considered underarmed for its weight. While that might be technically true, I don't think in practice it feels that way. It may not have the Warhammer's PPCs, but it also doesn't have the Warhammer's heat problems thanks to the Grasshopper's 22 single heat sinks. A Dipline HD large laser set into the center torso was the biggest weapon, though it was often outshined by the 4 Dipline M3 standard medium lasers spread across the side torsos and arms. Like with so many other Succession Wars mechs, the medium laser was the workhorse for damage production, and the 5H Grasshopper demonstrated it perfectly. Finally, a Conan S long-range missile 5 rack was added to the battlemech's head, and it was fed by a single ton of ammunition in the right torso. The addition of the LRM-5 was a contentious choice, as many are quick to point out that a potential damage of 5 at the cost of 3 tons, including 1 ton of explosive ammunition in the right torso, isn't a very effective use of mass. While technically true, the launcher did give the Grasshopper at least the opportunity of doing damage beyond the 15 hex max range of the large laser. Additionally, the various types of LRM ammunition available provided the Grasshopper some flexibility in its role as a forward fighter. Laying down smoke or even a 5-point minefield could be advantageous in the right situation. With an energy weapon loadout and the jump jets, heat could be a concern. However, the included 22 single heat sinks went a long way to assuage that trepidation. All of that added up to a battle mech that could put up numbers and chew through enemies with very little downside risk. Even the 1 ton of LRM ammunition in the right torso was just 1 critical location out of 6 on that side. Looking at both battle mechs, the loadouts for the Guillotine and the Grasshopper are quite similar. They both even carry searchlights for Pete's sake. However, the use of the SRM-6 in the Guillotine's center torso provides the mech with a clear advantage in the short range, while the Grasshopper's LRM-5 adds a slightly less impactful punch at long and mid-range. The other major difference and edge that the Guillotine has over the Grasshopper in these variants is that right torso case to protect the SRM ammunition and the additional 3 heat sinks it carries. Unfortunately, I think these advantages are too insurmountable for the Grasshopper, so I'm going to call an audible in the interest of fairness. For our tests, we're going to run the Succession Wars Guillotine, which better aligns the two battle mechs technologically. The Guillotine 4L hit the battlefields in 28-25, and thankfully it wasn't as painful as some of the other downgrades in the Succession Wars era. The endosteel was gone, unable to be replaced as mechs took damage, as well as the right torso case. The loss in mass savings was paid for in the removal of heat sinks, leaving just 22 out of the original 25. A full alpha strike while on the run left the 4L at 4+ into the red, which was not a huge issue so long as the next attack was tempered. Heat was a little bit more of an issue if the jump jets were used, but it wasn't egregious. The 4L remained a strong brawling heavy mech, though it did require the Mechwarrior to be a bit more Spartan concerning how it was used. Protecting that right torso SRM ammo would be high on the priority list. The Grasshopper 5H and Guillotine 4L are very similar machines, except for that SRM-LRM comparison. The more that I write about it, the more I just want to jump in with our testing. Can our grizzled veteran Guillotine retain its position, or will the fresh-faced Grasshopper knock it down a few pegs? After taking input from our last Versus battle, I have vastly increased the number of matches, as well as factoring in the percentage of mech remaining on the Survivor. I also want to reiterate that 1v1 fights in BattleTech are impacted heavily by dice rolls. A single roll can make or break a mech, and in larger games of 4v4 or 5v5, the effects of a single headshot or a through armor critical are not as drastic. It's something to keep in mind anytime we pit two battle mechs against each other. One of the more frequent suggestions from the last Versus video was to increase the number of tests to improve the data collected. Sure enough, I spent the entire day running these two battle mechs against each other. For the 4L Guillotine and Grasshopper 5H, I set up 30 1v1 matches. 26 of them were performed by 2 instances of Megamech's Princess bot and the same settings over and over. The remaining 4 matches, I controlled one of the battle mechs, 2 with the Guillotine and 2 with the Grasshopper, in order to build a better understanding of why one mech or the other performed as it did. My hypothesis going into the testing was that the Grasshopper would have an early but fleeting advantage with that LRM launcher. Sure enough, as the data came in, win after win for the Guillotine showed that almost every match turned into a short-range slugfest because each mech performed best when the medium lasers were in play. Once in short range, that SRM-6 was able to wear down the Grasshopper's armor and then seek critical hits. The final results across 30 matches included 18 wins for the Guillotine, 11 wins for the Grasshopper, and one match which was a tie as both battlemechs were destroyed on the same turn. With 60% of the matches going to the Guillotine 4L's favor and only 37 resulting in a Grasshopper victory, it definitely looked as though we were closer to determining which mech was a better pick on average. However, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, and so I also recorded the condition of the battlemech which survived each encounter. Finding the mean condition when the battlemech survived an encounter, i.e. 1, offers a little better insight into just how tough a fight was for a mech. The Grasshopper's mean condition, counting only the matches in which it survived, was 79.2. For the Guillotine, its mean condition was 71.5%. This lets us know that between the two, when the Grasshopper won, it tended to do so in better condition than the Guillotine when it won the fight. While it's still possible that a few fluke moments here or there could skew the percentages in 30 matches, it's still interesting to ponder. While it might be tempting to just wrap things up and declare the Guillotine the victor, I think we need more data. I think we need to leap down the timeline a bit and see what the Helm Memory Core upgrades have to say about this grudge match. By the 3040s, the Guillotine was a pretty rare sight across the Inner Sphere. With the reintroduction of Endosteel and Case thanks to the Helm Memory Core, Irian Battlemechs was able to dust off the plans for the Guillotine 3N and then build upon it with their own tweaks. The resulting Guillotine GLT-5M, released in 3049, looked a lot like the Star League version, except for the swap of the large laser over to the ER variety. I don't even know why I say it. Of course the large laser was upgraded to the ER large. Double heat sinks? Pfft, not needed. Just get out there and have some fun. The 5M carried 25 single heat sinks, which was a return to form, but the 4 additional heat from the ER large laser throws the heat management equation into the bin. A full alpha strike on the run left the 5M at 5+ heat into the red, which is immediately going to cost the mech some of its movement until the heat can be bled off by the heat sinks. At least the case in the right torso is back. Overall, the 5M is basically the 3N with extra steps, but one has to look at it and wonder what could have been done if they had double heat sinks handy. In 3049, Colonel Evelina Haskell of the 21st Centauri Lancers sought out a refit for the organization's existing Grasshoppers in hope of updating them for the post-Helm Memory Core universe. The resulting variant, designated the GHR-5J, was not as extensive a remodel as many other Helm redesigns because it couldn't mess too much with the internal bits. None of the basics were changed from the 464 movement, jump jets, and unfortunately the 22 single heat sinks remained both single and 22. I hear online dating is rough in the 31st century. As far as the weaponry goes, the 5J fits the Helm Memory Core pattern of upgrading large lasers to the ER variety and converting missile racks into streak launchers. 2 of the standard medium lasers remained, split between the left and right arms, but the LRM-5 was swapped out for a Streak SRM-2, which reduced the mech's ability to project power, but also slightly boosted its short-range impact. Finally, an anti-missile system was added to the right torso, along with 1 ton of its ammunition in the left torso, to further improve the mech's survivability. Overall, the Grasshopper 5J is perhaps slightly more survivable, but the trade-offs are substantial. Without being able to upgrade to Endosteel or take advantage of double heat sinks, the options for boosting the mech's capabilities were limited. One of the most glaring compounding issues was the addition of the 2nd ton of SRM-2 ammunition into the right torso. While it could theoretically help the Grasshopper on an extended campaign, that's 100 shots of Streak SRM-2 ammunition that are just waiting for a critical hit to light the mech up like a Griswold family Christmas decoration. Without even the case installation, this 200 damage worth of SRM munitions completely defeats the purpose of having a zombie mech. As a result, a 5J's Mechwarrior would be forced to protect his or her right side as if it were dipped in gold. So now that we know our updated variants, let's see how they did when smashed together like Matchbox cars. In the same setup as before, I ran 30 matches with 26 a direct bot v bot match up on Megamech and 4 where I was an active participant, twice in the Grasshopper and twice in the Guillotine. Immediately it was obvious that the dynamic between these two machines was significantly different than with their Succession Wars era counterparts. The fights tended to be much closer, often with both machines significantly damaged if they won. While the Guillotine 5M is a better machine than its Succession War era downgrade, it doesn't benefit as much as the Grasshopper did shifting to the 5J. Now before you yell at me, the 5J of course does have its own issues which we just previously covered. No one will be shocked to find out that in none of the matches did it last long enough to burn through 2 tons of Streak SRM-2 ammunition. Most of the matches, the launcher only fired 5 or 6 times. The 30 matches played out in a much more even way than with the Succession Wars variants. The Grasshopper pulled out 14 victories and the Guillotine won 16. That's 47% and 53% respectively. Even the battle value damage percentages were closer at 30.7% for the Grasshopper and 36.3% for the Guillotine. Still, it looks like the Guillotine was able to once again come out on top. What I saw looking at the fights was a lot of close-range brawls with the SRM-6 on the Guillotine was partially mitigated by the Grasshopper's anti-missile system, but not enough that the Streak SRM-2 would match that damage output. The Guillotine's case saved the mech's life several times, though usually it only delayed the inevitable by a round or two. Just for fun, and to wrap up this monument to the 70-ton brawling duo, I decided to run one more match. This time it would be 4 Grasshopper 5Js against 5 Guillotine 5Ms. Though the match lasted quite a while, it turned out that the twice-beaten Grasshopper came out on top. The final results were 4 destroyed Guillotines to 2 destroyed Grasshoppers. The remaining battle value was 36.31 of the original Grasshopper force. I'm glad that the Grasshopper was able to save some face there at the end. So what do we take away from all this? Looking at the Grasshopper and Guillotine, at least in these two forms at their places in the timeline, the Guillotine appears to hold a consistent edge. Of course, if you need to pick anything up on a mission, you might want to go with the Grasshopper since it has hands. Never underestimate having hands. Of course, I'm curious what you think. Do you agree with the results of these tests? Are you on Team Grasshopper or Team Guillotine? Please let me know in the comments below. Is there anything you would like to see in future Versus videos? If this one works out, I'm eager to keep refining the process and to make sure that they're worthwhile for you, the viewers who make this all possible. Thank you as always for coming by as we talked some BattleTech, and thank you to those from the MechFrog Discord who shared their painted minis. If you want to join us, I've included the link to the Discord server in the video notes below. If you enjoyed this video and feel it's worthy, don't forget the thumbs up button, and even hitting subscribe will make it much more likely you'll see my nonsense in the future. For those who've taken the extra step of becoming channel members or supported on Ko-fi, thank you. Without you, none of this would be possible. Until we meet again, please take care of yourself and your loved ones by making this world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.